Fisheries is an important sector in terms of food security and income generation for poor people, and especially our inland fisheries. We are fortunate to have three large lakes: Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika, and Lake Nyasa. So we have significant inland fisheries both in rivers and lakes, but we also have offshore marine fisheries. They're very important in terms of livelihoods, but also revenue, but also protein. And we're beginning to see development of export-oriented fisheries. But there's also a huge problem of illegal fishing, illegal sailor fishing, and illegal type of fishing using poisons and dynamite. In terms of the development picture and investment setting, we need to link it with urban growth and expansion. In the 1980s, 15% of our population was urbanized. Now it's between 35 to 40, and by 2015 it's estimated to be 50%. So half of us will be living in urban areas. Unfortunately, not planned urban areas. We've seen failures in urban planning, and the consequences are poor water supply, poor electricity, solid and liquid waste, poor sanitation, very poor numbers of schools and health centers, and again, problems associated with charcoal, energy and firewood, roads and so on. We haven't had constant electricity in Tanzania since last May, so even in the capital in Dar es Salaam, but that's another story. In terms of disease, malaria and cholera remain serious problems even for urban areas, and this is a result of poor management of urban environment. And all these are significant challenges. But linked to that, of course, is also industrial development. A lot of industries tend to be in urban areas, and where you don't have enough water and you don't have enough electricity, then your production becomes not enough, it becomes more expensive, you can't export, and so on and so forth. And it becomes a vicious circle. Again, in terms of investment, the call now is for more responsible investment. We don't want any more simply any investment. We're calling now for responsible investment. Responsible investment in climate change opportunities, in agriculture. In terms of agriculture, we're seeing a lot of acquisition of land for biofuels and bioenergy. And some of the stories have not been very good in terms of, again, land acquisition, the way that land has been acquired. It hasn't been fair to local communities. It hasn't given them a share to try to take part in the opportunities. And there's been a lot of, how should I put it, hoodwinking. We've seen companies acquiring land, and the land that they acquire is forested land. There's plenty of land which has been degraded. They don't want that. They want forested land, and then they seek permits and harvest all the forest, sell all the wood, plant some jatropha, and then disappear. So we're now left with jatropha. Who's going to uproot it? It's toxic, it's not good for animal feed, you name it. And this isn't a single event. It's multiplying itself and manifesting itself differently in different parts of the country. We're seeing again significant elite capture. Again, in wildlife, in tourism, fisheries, and again land. I'll add climate change to the picture because Tanzania is going to experience in the short term about 10% reduction in rainfall, and longer term up to 20%. And when you look at this situation and imagine that 80% of the rural people rely on agriculture, it's a catastrophe. It's expected that over 338,000 square kilometers of forest will shift over the same period from subtropical forest to woodlands and tropical dry forest to woodlands. So that's a significant change in the quality and the content of the type of forestry. In turn, wildlife will be affected, and so will tourism, and so will fisheries. And we've already begun to see signs of this happening. And yet today, despite the fact that there's a lot of discussion and research around vulnerability surrounding climate change, we're not seeing significant or concomitant efforts at climate proofing all these sectors to address directly the issues of climate change. It's not happening fast enough. But I must say that in terms of the dialogue and the discussions, I think it was last week I came across some paper, and they looked at the climate change scenarios of a selected number of African countries, 10, 12 or whatever. And to my surprise, Tanzania ranked highest in terms of talking about it, but not so high in terms of doing something about it. The consequences of all what I've mentioned so far are resulting into conflict vulnerability, and these are linked to the environment. We're seeing a lot more conflict over natural resources. We're seeing evictions. We're seeing conflicts, which Elias will talk about, I think, tomorrow on Wednesday, so I won't go into it. There's conflict between livestock keepers and farmers, so over land and water and distribution of land. The quality of the environment is declining and will consequently affect the revenues from different sectors. And therefore, what is key is for government to understand better these policy failures and address them. And the only way that they can address them if there's continued pressure being applied and continued information being supplied.